All right, let's get this going here. What are we working on today? We are working in the home lab here a little bit. Maybe asking you guys some questions about how you prepare and assess that you're ready to maybe go get some of these different jobs that are out there. I keep hearing that there's a bad job market, but I don't know. I'm a little insulated from that, I guess, because I work and I teach, so I guess I see it some with my students, but I don't experience it as much. And I see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, but I don't know how real any of that stuff is. So we'll just kind of hang out and talk through some of these. I might even pull up a little bit on the old. Sometimes I pull up over here the old Dice, right? What does Dice say? Right, we can see what they're doing. Here's what kind of Linux admin stuff they got going on. See what kind of jobs they're looking for and what the job descriptions are. Can almost guarantee you some of the words that are going to be used across there every time. But yeah, we're gonna sit around and talk about that a little bit. If anybody wants to get involved and talk, that's what I'm gonna work on. Oh, I do have a lot more lab stuff to clean up, but I can clean the lab stuff up later, and on Sundays we typically do the lab cleanup stuff, so that's fine as well. So yeah, we're just working on getting you guys hopefully at least somewhat knowledgeable. Let me fix this so this works. Try to get you guys at least somewhat knowledgeable about what's going on in the industry, and there's kind of like these levels to this. We've talked about, like, you gotta have some functional capabilities. You gotta go learn some Linux, right? And then you need to be able to show somebody else that you can do that Linux, and in a capacity that amounts to something that they would either hire you for as a consultant if you were going to go that route and run your own business, or as an employee, right? They want, at the end of the day, what they want you to be able to do has, I guess, only about half as much to do with Linux as it does half as much about being able to, like, have the capacity to fix things and keep things running, right? Like, Sing Japan, we said, hi, can I make playlists in order? I have all kinds of playlists. Is that, you want me to make this particular playlist, which is just a one-off of me talking about Linux? I don't know what you're asking me. You might have to reword that a little bit. All right, so anyways, let's talk a little bit of about what's going on with the system here. So that first part, like, you got to take a little bit of stock of yourself, right? We talk about, like, backing up and looking at, what am I good at? What do I want to do, right? Because one of the worst things you can do, and I talk about this with my college students, like, you could be, 4 years into a college degree, just about to graduate, and find out that you hate the work. I just think that would be terrible. Like, I would rather at least somewhat enjoy what I do, right? But anyways, in the self-assessment matrix here, this is a way to go about kind of assessing yourself for what you want to do. It's not the only way. There's probably 100 of them online. In fact, there's probably better ones than mine. I could just talk you through mine because this is the way that I would do it. If I had to go reevaluate my career, right? If I had to stop being a Linux engineer for some reason, this is what I would do to decide if I wanted to go into sales or project management or security engineering or whatever I found myself wanting to go into. This would be how I would sit down and take stock of it, right? And this is all up in the Discord as well, so if any of you guys need to look at this, this is in the Discord under the presentations channel. Let me make sure I'm not lying to you here. Right here. Presentation channel, where's he at? I think right here, presentations. And this should be, is that me doing that? Self-assessment right here from 11/17/2023. Look, I'm saying the same things I've been saying for years, even longer than that. Anyways, self-assessment matrix. What's the methodology of our matrix? If we're going to have a matrix and we're going to use it to standardize things and and be objective about things as opposed to subjective, how might we go about doing that, right? How might we go about applying some kind of rigor as though we were engineers to our lives, right? And our methodology here is a purpose, a scope, so in scope, out of scope, methodology, and control, right? And the purpose is self-assessment to determine skills and skill gaps. What skills do I have and what skill gaps are there? Then another part of this would also be align skills and interests within the assessed individual. So you are the assessed individual if you want to do one of these. Your scope will be questions around your current technical skills and technical interests, and then business skills and business interests, right? So those are the things we're walking through, right? In scope and out of scope, yeah. So out of scope is, we're not talking about a team. So I originally wrote this as a self-assessment matrix in a team that I was working on. And anytime I talk about what's in scope, I give some kind of clear things that need to be looked at or considered out of scope, meaning that while they are interesting to the thing that we're doing, we're not worried about them. So like out of scope for this was team needs. This was an individual doing their own assessment. It wasn't assessing, oh, well, but the team needs somebody to do Grafana. The team needs somebody to build monitoring, so I'll put that in as part of my assessment. No. This was your assessment. What do you want to do? Right? That kind of stuff. All right. Hold on a second, guys. Yeah. So guys, this is my YouTube channel, right? Here are playlists right here. You need playlists that are in order, they're right here. All right. Methodology, right? So apply an approach to objectively determine skills and interests. If you have skills and they align with interests, that's something we spend time in. If we have skills but no interest, we don't spend any time with those. If we don't have so we don't do that. We ask the same questions all assess individual. Flying Wookiee, do you have any time? Yeah, what's your question? What do you need? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why I'm so worked up right now. I'm trying to just relax and hang out, but I'm getting all worked up over here. So yeah, what's up? What's the question? I can help you as best I can, probably. But it'll be standardized to 100 points and then control. Same questions will be asked of all individuals. Ansible setting up a user that does Ansible tasks. Okay. Like a service account that does the tasks on all your servers for you. I would definitely do it as a service account. And then that service account would be given sudo permissions to do the things it needed to do. But anyways, go ahead. Ansible setting up a user that does Ansible tasks. Okay. Like a user, I would use, I've been places we use like SVC Ansible, Service Ansible, but SVC is something we always put on the front of a service account anyways. So then like Service Ansible, Service Grafana, Service Prometheus, right? SVC is always on the front of things. Like that's what I would do. And then what you have is with proper logging, either rsyslog or Loki, now you have anytime Service Ansible ran anything and touched anything in the company, because now you're tracking the user. The user password can be rotated. However, typically the system that's going to connect in is going to have keys, so then the keys can be rotated. No, it can't be no login. It has to be able to get to a shell because it's logging in Ansible as a control user, so it does have to have a shell. It can't be user sbin no login. It has to have bin bash. Yeah, but you can lock it down. It would be a normal user. And then it would have sudo permissions to do certain things, and then you could expand those things as you needed. Unless it's going to do everything, then you would give it. You could make it. You could make it like any account. Sometimes security has root access in their service accounts, which I also hate. But sometimes security has that because they want to be able to touch anything in the service, anything in the server. So. Yeah, but if it's going to be a full admin account that has full admin permissions, you could technically give it just full sudo access. Yeah, that would be one way to do it, and then you could limit that down to how it logs in, where it logs in from. There's a bunch of stuff like that, but that's how I do it. Service account typically, SVC, Ansible. That's the way I'm normally doing it. So hopefully that kind of. is clear as mud for you. That's how I would do it. Yeah. Because then you could just put that account in Tower, you can give it a key, and then that key can go against whatever servers it's allowed to go on. Tower is Ansible automation platform now, but I'm sure some people are still running Tower. Only quirk is we run Google Authenticator and it doesn't quite work when I try to ignore 2FA for the Ansible user and SSH DPAM stuff. Yeah, so that's a problem. And then at that point, I would say it depends what you're trying to do, because there are. Yeah, it is definitely a pain. Yeah, for that kind of stuff. Whenever you start talking about things that can't bypass automatic login, then you don't have programmatic control anymore, right? What I mean by that is your company has to be able to have the facilities for treating some things as programmatic access and some things as people access, like user access, right? And if they don't have some way to bypass certain things as programmatically allowed to do things, then you don't have the capability anymore to automate. Like I would tell you, I walked away. I walked away to get water from my fridge. But what I would say is this: your company has to capitulate in some way for things to programmatically happen. If they can't, if they say, no, we must treat a user as a user, Ansible says it's a user, and it's going to be a user, and it's say, okay, well, then we don't do automation. We literally walk to each and every system, each and every workstation. We do the commands on them, and then we walk, that's an SSH with a two-factor login, to each and every workstation. And they say, well, how long does it take to patch 1,000 servers now? And you say, well, it's all hands on deck with all 100 of us guys on the team, and it literally takes us, we do 10 servers an hour each of us. So you figure it out, right? It's going to take all night. It's going to take all weekend, and then we're going to be all burned out. And they say, well, can't you automate it? No, I can't. We don't have programmatic access to our servers, right? So my point is, you don't have to get in a fight with anybody, but you do have to make sure that people understand. My point is, you don't have to get in a fight with them, but you have to make them understand, like, programmatic access is required for automation to work. So you said you can bypass Google Authenticator, and it says, yeah, Flying Wookie. I wonder if it can be bypassed, because I think if somebody sets it up in PAM where it's a required, you may not be able to get around it. Yeah, and Control Byte's right. You have to. There's always a trade-off, and this is something that, like, I'm not saying this to be combative, but it's true in the sense that security is the enemy of productivity, right? I could be so much more productive if I didn't have to log into each workstation. I didn't have to pull out my YubiKey or my CAC card, right? Common access card. Or I don't have to pull out my password literally every single time I go everywhere. Which is why we do keys, but then keys can be compromised. Keys can be seen by other people. Keys have to be rotated every time we lose a root user, and because they could have gotten access to the keys. And it's like, it's just this thing. Yeah. So with Control Byte, as he said, you have to tell them the language of money. Like, this is going to be a prohibitive cost to maintain anything more than 60 servers per week with the, amount of people that we have. Because we can't, if you're going to, like, it's legitimately hamstringing automation when you don't allow people to get in. Singapuram, I try to give names to things so that they kind of at least make sense what we're working on, but we work on a lot of stuff here, so most of the stuff we do is just kind of ephemeral unless you find things that's, like, very important. And what I mean by that is the live sessions are just kind of live sessions. We just do whatever, right? If that makes sense. The stuff that's important, I would say, is up in the what are they called? The playlists. That's where you could find those. Flying Wookie, just for background, we have full control of the server, only 3 devs. One of our customers forced us to be more secure, but they don't audit us anyways. Flying Wookie, I would tell you, really, you have to get some level of some way to be able to touch that server through a programmatic access, and that's how I would frame that and say, look, programmatic access is no different than any other application that can use a certificate to get in. Any other, we have this account, we have this method of hitting it, and this is what we do in this environment. That's what I would focus on, Flying Wookie, if that were me. But yeah, I would make like a service account. It would be auditable. We can show them, hey, we can audit it. we can have sudo be part of the permission set, and it can only do certain things if we want. We can add to that as we go. This doesn't have to be the wild, wild west where we're just shooting rounds off in the air and doing whatever we want, like Outlaws. We can still be like a controlled admin team doing real good, operational activities and stuff. Stephen Ball, how's it going? And kind of disagree on that. You can be more productive, lose all your services due to security misconfiguration or yeah, look, it's that argument of what allows you to go fast in your car. Well, it's the brakes, right?
Answer that for money.
The idea that when you have brakes, if I say, well, I'm going to cut your brake lines, then you say, well, I'll still drive my car home. Well, how fast will you go? Probably like 5 miles an hour. So the adage is accurate. The adage is true that security is maybe not the enemy, but that is the way we say it. We say security is the enemy of productivity. But the idea is we still need security to be able to be productive because it does give you a modicum of control around confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Yeah, and I say that, fully well knowing that I'm as much of a security engineer as anybody around, right? I have all the chops. I've run that stuff for years. I build my stuff securely, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Yeah, Flying Wookie. So hopefully that works for you. So, all right. So here's the methodology we're going to use. And then this is how we start, right? Here's your technical self-assessment. And you can change these any way you want. This is just my generic ones for people in this group. And you would just say if you think you're high, medium, or low across any of these areas. And then you would give yourself a number at the end, right? And when you get to that number at the end and you say, hey, my Linux skill is maybe like a 7. I feel like I'm pretty good at it, but I have some room for improvement to get up into high. And then maybe my storage is pretty low because maybe I haven't worked on storage in a few years, but I still feel pretty confident in what I'm doing. And then we work through this and we get a number. And this is one part of it, right? Like how well do you assess yourself is just one part of it. You can't focus on all of these in your career. That's way too much to try to focus on. So then the next part of it is your interest. It's the same thing, but how interested are you? I happen to do Linux all day, every day, so my interest in Linux is somewhat high, and I need to maybe study more and practice more to get better at it, right? Some of you tell me, honestly, that you're like a 3 in security, but you want to do security all day, so your security interest is high, and that helps you. This is your own self-assessment. I'm not assessing you guys. This is you assessing yourself. And it's like, well, how much do I think, like where should I spend my time? And I would say it's in security, right? That's your assessment of yourself. You want to get better at security. You want to do that professionally, but you don't think you are very good at it yet in your skill. Your interest aligns with that. That's where you need to spend your time. And some people, obviously, you don't need this all the time. Some people can just naturally do that, but a skills assessment is kind of useful for some people to write it down and figure out what they want to do, right? Because, like, rightfully so, some people are just going to sit down and go, I don't know what I want to do. Or they say, I do know what I want to do, but I haven't done it for the last 10 years. And I say, okay, well, we may argue that you don't want to do it. And you say, but I really want to do it. And I'm like, well, but you're not showing you want to do it. So, I mean, actions speak louder than words, as people say. Or I can't hear what you're saying over what you're doing, if you will. Right? Because the other option is you just can't do it. And I don't believe that about people. I think if somebody wants to be a security engineer, they can spend time and get good at this stuff. If they want to be a Linux engineer, I think they can spend time and get good at this stuff. I really do believe that about people. There may be some limitations in some people, but I don't think as a general rule that some person just off the street couldn't do this stuff if they wanted to. All right. So then the next part is like a business self-assessment. And I tell people, this is always the one that I say, like, do you want to be a manager or do you just want to be an engineer? Like, they've been trying to make me a manager for 20 years, and I don't want to be a manager. I just want to be an engineer. So I hang out and I say, my skills in some of these areas are okay. Time management is probably mid or low. Public speaking is fine. I feel fine with it. Managing others, pretty low. I'll just fire everybody. Budget financials, I'm probably medium at that. I feel fine about budgeting and understanding how ledgers work and stuff. Vendor interactions, I understand vendors pretty well, I think, so maybe I put that as kind of a high one. But then when we go down to our interests, I have no interest in managing vendors and maintaining relationships with vendors and keeping track of contracts, and like I don't want to do any of that stuff. That's none of this stuff really interests me except public speaking where I teach. But like managing people and wiping people's noses and stuff, I have no interest in doing that professionally. None, zero. So anyway, so I would put a bunch of lows here for my interest. So then all I did to myself was say, well, I don't want to be a manager. All right, so anyway, so my point in all this is, this is your self-assessment. How do you get better at something? Well, you find what you are good at or aren't good at. You find out what you want to do, and then you figure out how to bridge the gap. Right? So then we talk a little bit about SWOT analysis. This is typically a business thing, but I think a SWOT analysis is really good for people. If you've never done a SWOT analysis or heard of one, you might find this useful. But there's your strengths and your weaknesses, which are generally with an asterisk there within your control. And then there's external, outside of your control, are opportunities and threats, which are managing others. Yeah, and it's like, it's not that like I think that they're all jerks or I think that I'm smarter than them, but it's just sometimes it's like, oh man, what are you guys doing? Like, we literally just had a meeting about this, and I feel that as just a lead engineer. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm just like running around in circles going like, geez, we call it herding cats. Herding cats, right? Like, could you imagine, if any of you guys know what a cat is, which I imagine you all do, could you imagine trying to get 10 of them to go to like one side of a room? Well, I guarantee you, if you don't have a hold of all 10 of them, they're not going that way. And if you've ever tried to hold a cat that doesn't want to be held, that's not going to go very well. So my point is, like, you can't really herd cats. You can't really herd engineers. It's the same type of concept. But anyway, so here's what a SWOT analysis might look like. Your strengths are things that you do well in, how you excel. What if up here, real quick, just for a second, what if up here you just looked at databases, and maybe you did like a little class online like ScyllaDB or like CockroachDB, and you're like, man, I understand databases. And then maybe you get down here and you're like, I don't really like them that much. Well, it's work for a reason. So maybe you find that that's something that you excel in, right? You excel at database work. And maybe all the normal forms sliding between 1 and 5 just make sense to you. For some people, that's 1 and 5, the numbers, not the time. Anyways, it doesn't matter. My point in saying that is, like, some people have strengths that they don't necessarily like to do, but they're good at it, right? So, and then how do you like to learn? Like, do you like to pick things up and study them on your own or whatever? Those are your strengths. These are strengths. Weaknesses are things you just know you don't do well. I happen to know I don't want to manage databases, right? I don't want to do it. I look at the database guys the same way that people look at me as a Linux engineer. They're like, what, you want to look at this all day? You want to look at like this kind of stuff all day? What's wrong with you? And I look at the database people the same way. So I get it, right? But weaknesses are things that you just know you don't do well. You know, another one I really don't like? I don't like audit. Sorry, guys, I'm biting this stupid nail on my finger. All right. Weaknesses, things you do not do well, things that you may work on but never master. I'm just never going to be a guy that's good at audit. You show me like a list of like 10,000 lines of like line items where it's like 117642 is like a bucket and 117643 is a mop, and like I just have to like I'm never going to be good at that. I know that. That's the only part. There's this thing in the military when you're in high school, you take this military thing called the ASVAB. That's the only part I didn't ace. Is that thing. Yeah. Oh, you're one of the weird engineers that like managing people. Some people do, right? Some people can do that. And this is one of these things I tell you, like, know your strengths. Some people hang out here and they already know what they're good at, right? Obviously, I'm not talking to them, but for somebody that's never done this stuff, this is a good thing to sit down and take stock of yourself. If all you do, guys, if there's like this funny thing, people like to joke around about like, oh, I can't keep a houseplant alive. Guys, if you kill houseplants, that's a you problem. The plant wants sunlight and water, and if you're not giving it those two things, it's going to die. And that's a thing you should know about yourself. That's a weakness. That's not the plant's fault, especially not like 30 plants, right? That's your fault. Anyways, external, outside your control, opportunities and threats. Opportunities are like courses you can take, market needs, like employment opportunities, things that fall in your lap. And I like to tell people, like, externals out of your control, But there's kind of a certain amount of this, like, and we argue with this in one of our channels, like the job and interview channel, where there's some people who they just see the market as bad right now, and they are never going to believe that there's jobs out there, no matter what we do. We're never gonna convince them to look positively at anything. Like, people don't realize the market can be really, really down, but you can still get one job. You only need one job, don't you? The market could be the worst market on planet Earth, but as long as you get the one job you need. Anyways, my point in saying all this is, like, opportunities and threats are things that are like outside your control, but I don't know, man, your perspective on life kind of guides a little bit of this stuff, right? Threats are market saturation, industry moves too quickly, geopolitical. Like, we can't do business with Russia from the U.S. You might have had a thriving business selling, I don't know, little action figures in Russia, and now you can't do that anymore. You can't do that because of nothing in your control, right? That's not your fault. That's just geopolitical. We are not allowed, like, a lot of people don't know this, or hopefully you do if you're involved in this. You cannot exchange money with a person from Russia right now if you're in the U.S. That is 100% illegal. You cannot exchange money with them. You can't give them money for goods and services. They can't give you money for goods and services. That's illegal right now, right? There's all kinds of embargoes and other shit on that. And maybe you can go get some legal advice on that. And maybe there's some loopholes, but that's not something I want to deal with. But that could have been a threat, right? I just heard a thing. I was just reading a headline today that said some stuff with Venezuela. There's a potential for wars and arguments and stuff with them. And it's like, anything that happens in the industry that could be a threat is kind of outside of your control, but you can kind of hedge and work in different environments to try to minimize that and all kinds of stuff. But the point is, we're only generally speaking. I'm not giving 100%. All these things are internal. Like, your strength is you're the best Linux engineer you've ever met. Somebody's gonna edge you out one day for something. Somebody's gonna edge you out. I think I told you guys one time very early in my career, I went to interview. I was working at Lockheed Martin, and they were closing up the plant. And I was looking for work at another place. There's a place out here, actually, it was called LifeLock. I don't even know if they still exist, but I got all the way to their last round of interviews, and I went up to, like, this. It was like a boardroom. I was sitting in a boardroom with, like, 3 of, like, their top guys, and they're like, hey, you're basically going to take this position from, like, this 4th top guy that was a Linux guy who's leaving, and you're going to be, like, running all this Linux stuff and this and this. And I was like, and this was early on in this was 13, 14 years ago now. This was a long time ago. And I remember they put me in front of a laptop and they started asking me questions, and I'm doing Linux and stuff. And they asked me something about HTTPD that I didn't know. Some process of Apache had to do with, like, how Apache was, like, logging things, and I didn't know. So I opened up the man page, and they go, we've never seen anybody open up a man page before in an interview. And I looked at them and I was like, have you guys had a Linux engineer in here before? We spent so much time in that, and this was early days even of Stack Overflow, right? Like, this was like, Stack Overflow was around, but I'm saying, like, it was that or the internet, and I worked in skiffs often, so I didn't have the internet really, so I used man pages to figure stuff out. And I found the answer to the problem, I think, but the point is, like, I got passed over, and it's like, well, I couldn't have helped that. They'd never seen a guy that does command line all day open up a man page. I thought that was kind of interesting, but they were also not their Linux engineer. These were all the other guys on the team, but whatever. So SWOT analysis might look like this. You start laying out your strengths. I'm pretty okay at Linux. I am pretty okay at systems engineering. I am pretty okay at networking. Those are my strengths. My weaknesses, what is it? What is the thing that they ask Ron Swanson what he's allergic to, and he says something like, what does he say? Like, something in weak-willed men. There. So then opportunities and threats, right? Like, so you lay these things out and you try to figure out what you would be good at. And this is self-assessment. Nobody else can do this for you guys. Nobody else can lay out what you are good at. I mean, you might have somebody on the outside watch you do stuff for a few weeks and then go, I think you're good at this and I think you're not good at that. But that's expensive and time consuming. And quite frankly, most people know that once something's being watched, just by the fact that it's being watched, it's going to change the outcome, right? That's we call that the Hawthorne effect, right? The Hawthorne studies. You can go look into that if you want. But the Hawthorne studies basically says you can't observe people with them knowing without it affecting their performance in some way. And the Hawthorne effect found out interesting things about people enjoying being on teams, and people get mad when you say money isn't the only motivator, and it's like we have actual evidence that people do get motivated by things other than money. In fact, being on a team is a huge part of human motivation. You can look that up. The Hawthorne effect was interesting because the Hawthorne studies had nothing to do with watching the people. It had to do with what they could do to the facility and still have productive people. They were like turning the lights down on these people and like giving them less equipment to see how little they could give people and still have them be productive in a factory. It was wild. And no matter what they did to these people, the people kept doing better and better. And you say, well, how does that show the Hawthorne effect? Well, the Hawthorne effect was found because of this, and it's the idea that when people know they're being watched and studied and they think that that's like a prestigious team to be on, they found out that everybody wanted to be on that team that was being watched, and everybody worked harder on that team, and it was kind of an interesting effect. So feel free to look up the Hawthorne effect sometime if you want. But that's kind of the first part of this, going and looking at yourself and thinking about what you want to do. And then the next part, one of the things we've been talking about quite a bit in the course, and we've had one of our more senior guys giving people some technical interview questions and walking them through different things and what the interview process feels like. And he's been working one-on-one with people, but allowing them to watch each other so they can see, what they like and what they don't like and kind of what the process feels like. So for me, I'm going to show you guys, or we're going to talk a little bit about questions that I ask when I do interviews, right? And my questions kind of look something like this. I've got technical questions I might ask you. I've got troubleshooting questions I might ask you. I've got operational questions that I might ask you, like operations and what you're doing. And I have personality type questions. Now, my personality questions often never get asked because I am not the guy that's there to assess somebody's personality. I tend to be there to assess their technical ability to do the job. Personality fit and team fit are things that I leave for other managers. In fact, do you guys want to see like one of my, I had an SRE role a few years back that I had to put together a presentation. Hold on. I had to put together an SRE interview set of questions, and I'll show you guys what that looks like if you want. Get rid of this over here. It's just subdued a little bit so it's not so bright. But this is my SRE technical interview. I actually wrote this for a team that I was on that I was helping them to rebuild their high performance compute team. They had went from like 8 people on the team to only 2, and I came in and I was there to just help work on everything and help get their team ready for the next year. And we built them back up to another 8 engineers, a few junior engineers, people in the pipeline to come up and work on stuff. And this is what their senior SRE interview looked like. This is how I took something that would be subjective between me and the other technical engineer and helped to make it a little more objective, right? Here's the same 5 things you saw before. This is always my testing methodology is always these 5 points. If I ever show you guys, like, I have other presentations where we go through, like, how we build a testing methodology and out. I always do these 5 things, always. You could add stuff, right? It's your test. It's your methodology. It's your, way of looking at engineering, right? But for me, this was looking at people and figuring out, like, this new senior SRE that we were going to bring on a team. Here, we'll get to these other questions later so I can use more of my screen space here. But my purpose was to select the next senior SRE. We wanted a senior person, site reliability engineer. We wanted technical questions to determine their capability to execute on the job duties. That's what I wanted to know. Could they do the job? What I wasn't doing was figuring out if I liked them, and I wasn't figuring out how well I thought they were going to do work or fit with the team or anything. Non-technical capabilities, personality fit, didn't care. It wasn't my goal. Same thing for most of you. If you ever sat in an interview with me, I was not there to see if I liked you, right? And if you liked me at the end of the interview, was irrelevant. My methodology was me and somebody else were going to be doing this, and we wanted to figure out how we would objectively determine the best technical candidate. So we had the same questions and normalized them to a 50-point template. They could get between 5 and 0, right? And then we could then add those up to 50 points and figure out where somebody might have fallen. The control that we used, and we only had, I remember we did like 8 of these interviews, me and this guy Mac. The same questions were asked to both candidates. We had to do all 10 of these questions. We only had like 30 minutes with these people. So it was like 3 minutes a question. It was quick. But we used a control of the same questions being asked of all candidates. I said both here, but it was all. And in a reasonable time frame to give an adequate time to answer. So we didn't bullshit a lot. We told them we had to go fast and get through them all. And we did, right? Even, I mean, I think a few of these went up in the 40-minute range. But for the most part, we let them talk. We didn't cut them off. But most people don't want to talk for more than 3 minutes. So that's a thing to understand in an interview. So these were things, this was outside of my control, guys. These are the actual specific requirements that were given for this team. And then on the next part, these were the specific competencies that were required. Okay? So competencies were things that were part of the actual job posting, as were specific responsibilities. Now, from these, I derived questions. The questions are going to be mapped back to these, right? And by the way, I never showed these to anybody. These were only showed nobody in the interview. Not like this is like secret material or anything. I'm not telling you what the team is that I was doing this for, but this is very generic with the exception of one thing. There's one thing that they specifically wanted, and it was really, this was a like a stretch thing, so this wasn't required, but it was like Cold Front. Cold Front is a front end for like HPC systems. Actually, I might need to look into that because I haven't played with Cold Front before. But this was the thing that I wanted to get a little bit of understanding about what they were using. But I was also okay with, in that question, I think I even, in the wording of the question, I say, or similar operational like dashboard for HPCs that you've worked with, right? So we were willing to accept something else. We were willing to accept nothing for this. I mean, they were going to lose points on their interview, but we kind of thought everybody was going to lose points on this, so it was kind of like normalized down. But you know, maybe somebody gives a really good answer. And I remember one of the candidates who actually got it gave a good answer for this, even though there wasn't a good answer, because this is very niche. You would have had to have been working in the industry big time for this, right? So anyways, here's the specific responsibilities. Here's the competencies. And then here's the matrix that they went against. And what I did was I just sat there and I asked the questions, right? What are some project management methodologies you've used and how much you apply them here at this organization, right? They would give their answer, and then me and Mac would, independently of seeing each other's points, fill out how good of a response we thought they did, right? Atticus, how's it going? Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. Yeah, we're just hanging out, doing a little bit of live streaming. The wife went to cut one of her friend's hair, so she'll be back in a little bit. She does a fair bit of her friend's hair for them. Next one, describe an automation tool you've applied or a pipeline you've built for deployments. What worked well for you, what didn't? And I remember the person who got the job, it was interesting. Automation tool, when I'm thinking of high performance compute, I'm thinking of things like XCAT or Ansible or Werewolf or a pipeline with Podman and a CI/CD built out of Jenkins and like all this stuff, right? But the guy who actually did this and won this and got this job, he didn't say any of those things. He hadn't done any of that. What he had done, which was really interesting, was he had worked with a library service for a college, a different college than the one that I was working for at the time. When I did this, I was embedded from Redline at this company. But he answered about a pipeline of build and test that he did for a set of web servers for some of these colleges that he worked with. And I was like, man, that was a really good pipeline. That is not a way that I would have ever thought to hear that unless somebody was like a front-end dev, and he had done a lot of front-end work and stuff. But he did it in the context of like he had been a librarian for like 15 years. But he was also a librarian that had spoken multiple times and done research for the Library of Congress, and he had been at like a bunch of their different things, and he built this query tool as a front end for a bunch of different library applications, and I thought it was really cool. But so his pipeline was completely different than anything I thought, but he understood processing through things. He understood getting good inputs and sanitizing those inputs and outputs, and he talked through all that pretty quick. And then we went on to the next part. What's your experience with Git or other versioning, and what are some best practices that you'd like to see from your junior engineers? Because again, he was going to be a senior. He was going to have a couple of junior engineers that he was going to have to work with and show this stuff to. And he had a pretty good little plan for Git, and he had his Git repos, and he had all these other things that were going on. So that was pretty good. Then this one, again, across the people that did it, nobody really had good cold front experience, and that was unfortunate. But we didn't hurt them too much on that because they both had the same poor experience. So that was kind of a push right across the board. And then we talked about what type of code reviews have you done and how would you implement them here if we had no program. It was funny, we had no program for scheduling reviews. And how are you going to review stuff? And actually the individual that explained their stuff and then came in started doing code reviews right away. And I thought this was pretty cool. Like, he's making us come and do code reviews and work through stuff, even though that's, something that he wasn't as maybe strong at as other candidates, but he ended up doing that and implementing it really well. This one was interesting because what types of operating systems updates have you done, and describe the processes you've used. Most people are going to be like, yeah, I've patched my system or patched my phone, but like a person that's been a system engineer for a while or come up from that route, they're going to have a totally different answer for this of how they patch, because it's totally different when you patch 1,000 servers versus patching just 10 servers. Totally different, right? All kinds of other considerations come up and all kinds of other things that they might discuss. So we really just had this as a level set for people and see how well they answered it. And, we had good answers from many of the candidates, but then we, put them down here and we used objective outcomes as opposed to just being like, well, I like that one. Yeah, I think I remember liking that one from that person. No, we wrote it down. Like, did they all give great responses or did they not give any response, right? Troubleshooting methodologies, metric gathering, describe some bash scripting that they've done, and software development framework. And all of these questions right here map back to exactly these things that we wanted to know from their specific responsibilities, right? By the way, this is all up in the Discord if anybody needs these, right? But then this is what one might have looked like. This isn't a very good score, but this is somebody getting 27 out of 50. And I think the person who actually got it was like 44 out of 50. And I remember me and Mac did this. We did probably about 20 interviews together. And I don't think we were ever more than like 2 off on our points. Sometimes like I would give a 4 and he would give like a 5. But at the aggregate at the end, we all were he and I were pretty similar on our scoring of different people. So I kind of thought this was a pretty good little way of doing that. I have those for a few different types of jobs and stuff, but so here's my technical questions, right? These are the types of things you might hear if you were to be in an interview with me. Also, the thing about technical questions, right, is they can sometimes be answered different ways, but they tend to be, technically derived, and I'm maybe looking for a very specific type of command or an answer that at least shows that you would be able to eventually find it, right? Technical is different than troubleshooting in that troubleshooting then is you've been presented with a problem and how would you go about finding the right answer, right? As opposed to operations, which is like prioritizing work and daily tasks, and then personality is like dealing with other people. Because you guys have probably heard this before. This is very true. This is even true in the tech sector. People quit like job environments. They don't quit jobs. I read a thing. I remember in high school I had a marketing class, right? And the DECA teacher, one of my best friend's dads, his it's actually funny. He told us, he said something like 95% of people that leave work leave it because of the managers or the environment, not because they don't like doing the work, right? And I thought that was always kind of interesting. Also, I think that's probably true. The longer and older I get and the more I do this, the more anecdotally true that is. People leave because they can't stand. I know 2 engineers right now on one of my projects that cannot work with the 3rd engineer. The 3rd engineer, yeah, Flying Wookiee, you don't quit your job, you quit your manager. I think that's probably somewhat accurate. But I know these 2 engineers who are both pretty good on this team. They cannot stand this 3rd engineer, this other guy. Let's see, how many people are on our team? Let's say there's about 15 of us on this team. We're operational and we're engineering tasks. So we do both tasks on this project. And 2 of these guys, they legitimately will not like get in huddles with this guy. They will not work with him without a manager being there. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I'm just going to tell you, they consider him both incompetent and they consider him untrustworthy, which both of those things are bad as an engineer for different reasons, right? But my point is, they will not work with him. Both of them. Like, you couldn't get both of them together to go work with this guy. They don't like him. They don't respect him as an engineer. It's bad. And so I've had to, like, it's kind of funny. I end up being in between the two of them, or the three of them, often, like a go-between. And sometimes, like, as long as I'm there, they'll talk to the other guy, or they'll work with the other guy. So it's like so there's problems, right? And some engineers, man, I just tell you, like, engineers have weird proclivities. Like, I've been in meetings where, like, there's this one guy, I actually really liked him at Lockheed Martin, but he would get the last word even if you guys were not arguing. Even if you were, like, agreeing, he would agree in argument with people for like 45 minutes instead of letting them have the last word. I don't know. Like, and he's like a senior manager with them now. And I'm just like, God, this guy loves fucking talking in meetings. I hate talking in meetings. You guys will never, ever, rarely, ever hear me talk in a meeting if you ever work with me. But I know, though, like, looking at stuff and reading all the stuff about these different studies that have been done, the people that talk in meetings tend to get promoted the most. I don't know if you guys know that. I tend to try to just do good work and have my work stand, right? But that's one of these things that, that's. I actually got told by a senior manager. She was like a director over many people. I keep in touch with her still from Lockheed Martin. She's like, yeah, Scott, I see all this good work you do, but you don't really do a good job of promoting yourself. And I'm like, I don't think promoting myself is part of my job. I'm the engineer. But my manager didn't like me, and that was a problem. That's neither here nor there. So this first one says, how would you verify that a file system, or how would you verify the file system type of a mounted file system? Is this different if it's unmounted? So if I was just in my home environment here, right? Just in some box. And we said, how would you verify that the file system, or what the type is of the mounted file system? Like, if I wanted to know what's the file system on the root file system on this machine, how would I go about getting it? Cool Kiss, maybe you'll be a yapper. Yeah, Cool Kiss, some people just... It said Cool Kiss and not Cold Kiss. Normally it says Cold Kiss. Jeez. Anytime Cold Kiss is around, my CC just thinks this is the most awkward. Hey, how's it going, Sending Grounds? I was alluding to you earlier. I didn't mention you by name or anything, but I was talking about we are going through, we just got done touching, pull it up for a second. We just got done talking through this, which is my senior technical SRE interview and how I go about, like, looking at a matrix, right? So this was something we just did before you guys got here. And then we also looked at, like, a self-assessment, which is here. Like, how would you do a self-assessment? We did that, right? And then what we were going into here was some of my technical questions that I might ask somebody in an interview, depending on the type of interview it is, depending on how free form it is, these kind of things. Because what we were talking about, Sending Grounds, is I was saying, you guys got to get the technical skills for the jobs that you want. And getting the technical skills is okay, but, like, before that, you need to step back and say, well, but what do I want to do? And that's what that self-assessment was, right? Like, the self-assessment was like, well, I could be a Linux engineer, or I could be a cloud engineer, or I could go be a project manager, but what do I want to do, right? And that's what that first part was. Fast Cat, that's actually funny. I found that to be true, that my technical interviews are more organized than most other people's. But I'll tell you, if you ever need those, right? If you ever need my, where do I have them? I know I have them in here. Don't make me a liar. I definitely have them in here. Hold on. Socratic Linux. Maybe I'm a liar. Maybe I don't have them in here. CKA certifications, Linux systems admins, self-assessments there, networking principles, 3-tier. Maybe I'm a liar. Certified. Twitch excelling in the engineering field, subnetting. I have a bunch of my stuff here. AWS stuff, Pathfinder, CKA. Huh? Maybe I don't have it. Huh? I thought I had these up there. But my point is, this is the way that I do it. This is the way that I objectively give, I think, a good. I already closed it again. a good interview. So if you guys need that, let me know. Yeah, and Pike Arch or RO, I don't know how to say that. My methodology here, I try to explain it right here up front. If I don't have this in the Discord, I'll drop this in the Discord, guys. I think because I had originally built this for another team, I had not maybe put this up there, but I have stripped it out of anything that is owned to them. But I always have these 5. Any test you guys ever see me do, anything you want me to validate or prove as an engineer, I will always go through this. So my goal of this is to make this into an objective thing instead of a subjective thing, where it's not just like, well, I kind of liked his answer for 1 and I kind of liked his answer for 2. No, I'm locked into a number. I kind of like, what are some project management methodologies you've used and how might you apply them here? You're either going to give me a great response and I just give you a 5 because I think you've handled that and touched it and whatever, and I think that you understand the intricacies of it within a team. Or maybe I think, and I didn't break it down this much of all that I'm thinking of, but I try to apply those same things. So it's not just like me sucking through my teeth and going, well, you didn't really know much about operating system updates. Yeah, let's not hire that guy. No, I can objectively say who I thought was best in the interview with this. So, yeah, I thought this was up there somewhere. Maybe this is somewhere else in the Discord. But anyway, so we were done with that, and we were into like some technical and troubleshooting and operations and personality questions that I might ask. And I just want you guys, I know you probably can't type them that fast and you can't really yell them at me, but I want you to think about what you would answer here. Like, how would you verify a file system type of a mounted file system? We've got some server over here, right? And we know maybe what's going on in it a little bit. Maybe you see that. And we could surmise that it's probably an ext4 or XFS, and maybe we know that because we're a relatively, hip engineer that's been doing this for a few years or something. But how would I know what the file system is of the server that I'm on, right? How would I go find that? And if I wanted to know that on an unmounted block or something like that, is that different? Could I know that? Is that an unknowable thing, right? So I might just ask you this and then say, what would you do? What would you do? I actually kind of like Sending's method where he makes you type it out for him. I think that's kind of cool, right? But yeah, there's an answer. Oh, Colchis, that actually goes through, but it's not showing right now, so it doesn't go anywhere. But it does. That actually is getting. It is still going somewhere. So LSBLK will show us some stuff about these these are blocks, block devices that are here, and they are on the system. And XVDA is ext4. There's somebody put something on this Rocky 5 server at some point in this server's life. But wait, is that actually what's mounted though? If I do a df-h, I don't have any of those mounted. Look at this. None of these map back to any of these. These are all inert disks just sitting there. So now between just that and just that, I don't have the answer yet of this root file system that I'm on and where it's mounted, right? So I might need to think a little more about that. I think mount is great. Mount might be, and do I grep maybe tempfs and look at all the tempfs and say, well, okay, on this right here on slash, the type is tempfs, and it's right here. Yeah, that may be useful for me to know, right? We're on a tempfs file system. It's interesting. I did not realize. That's good still to know. How about this one on XVDA? So if I mounted XVDA somewhere, if I did like mount dev XVDA into MNT and then did df-h on MNT, I would see that file system. Man, read the field. Yeah, you want to read the field manual, right? I love RTFM. I love making people in big meetings think that I'm about to ruin my career by saying read the fucking manual in front of all the directors and shit. It's one of my favorite things, but I always say read the field manual. So, but I will talk about RTFM in front of people, and I'll watch like engineers tense up. It's super funny to me. It's so funny because it's like they know I'm about to just tank my career in front of everybody, but then I always say read the field manual. I always chicken out. One of these days when I'm ready to just get out of the industry, I'll just be like, read the effing manual. I'll like look one of the directors in the eyes as I say it, and then they'll like have me getting walked out by security and stuff. Yeah, yeah, they clench up. You see them like grabbing the chair handles. Um, it's weird though. Like I joke around about that, but like I haven't been in a big room in front of like 200 engineers describing some change in probably since 2019 now, right? Because like when have any of you been in a big room with 200 other engineers and like an all hands? And that's just an all hands for like when I was at AAA, that's just an all hands for like infrastructures, and that's not everybody. That's funny. But the cussing in front of the teacher, yeah, that's funny. It's about to go down. I actually like Kevin Hart's delivery. He's a pretty good comedian for that kind of stuff. But anyway, so mount, we can check, we can see stuff. So is it different if it's unmounted? Yeah, if something's not mounted, typically you're going to have to go use like LSBLK. But LSBLK will show you things whether they're mounted or not. And DF will show you things as they are mounted. But it also isn't as useful as like the mount command, where it actually shows you the options. And a lot of times we need to know like, hey, this is one that actually happens sometimes on virtual machines, and this happens less often, but maybe like 10 years ago this was a more prevalent thing. A root file system on a, and this isn't a troubleshooting thing I would ask somebody. This would be so specific. This would be like something I would talk to my team about, because it's something that happens in our environment, and I would have somebody investigate it and maybe write up like a check for it, or maybe not even a check, but like something around like a standard operating procedures for when you see it after a check is fired. But this was like a real bad thing for a while there with VMware and ESXi, where if a system moved, like if Rocky 5 did what's called like a vMotion to another file, to another server, and just something wasn't right, like the server couldn't take the type of underlying virtual machine that it actually was, because they had these types of virtual machines like underlying the actual VMDK that you had, and it couldn't take it. What would happen is the slash, right, the root file system would become read-only. We called it like the read-only problem. And it was insidious, man. It would happen, and if you had, here's the thing, it was insidious because if your build right here, do you guys see temp on its own directory? Nope. So if temp was on its own directory path /temp, and it wasn't affected by this, then typically the system would keep running for a while. But if like /temp can't be written to, things break almost immediately, right? So, but either way, it's still an insidious problem, because you might not have logging happening, right? var log may be on there, but typically with CIS benchmarks that we use, var log would be on its own. But it was wild because sometimes those would also go read only. So my point is, it's like there's all these things that can happen. This is Colchis. That's like me as Deckard Cain saying stay a while and listen. That's not really a problem that still happens much. But these are the things that we look at, right? Like I would very quickly, if I was just looking for mount and I knew these were all tempfs, one of the things I might do very quickly is go make sure they didn't go all read-only. Read-only is a problem. Make sure that's not there. Yeah, FastCat. Yeah, we had a problem, and it had to do with the versions of ESXi. Sometimes they were rolling through, and they were taking like a week to update all the dev boxes or something. So dev servers that were like functioning as our batch would break at night sometimes. It was just, yeah. And this, guys, one of the worst types of errors on planet Earth is what we call a transient error. And that is an error where things don't, like, I can't recreate the error. You know, Scott goes to Rocky 5 later and it's there, but then Scott can reboot Rocky 5 and it goes away because it's on the right node, so it comes up and it's fine. But Scott cannot reproduce the error even by moving with vMotion all day. Doesn't happen. And then later on that night it happens again. And you're just sitting there like, just pissed at this thing, just looking at it like, what the fuck is going on here, right? Like, because there's no read the field manual any harder for that one. Yeah. So transient errors, I tell people cable errors are bad for this too in data centers, where it's like, man, we have looked at everything. Guys, I'll tell you an error. This is one, I would not have believed this. And by the way, for everybody watching on either Twitch or YouTube, I will 100% be okay with none of you believing this. I'm going to tell you this right now. I experienced this, so I believe this, and I know this to be true. In the early days of InfiniBand, we had Lustre cables, and the longest, it was for the Lustre operating system on early InfiniBand. It was these copper cables, and it said, oh, by the way, we had, they could be 6 meters, so approximately 18 feet, right? And we had to run them down from one rack to a turned rack on the other side, so hot aisle on the outsides and then cold aisle in the middle, so like our AC, and this wasn't like closed in type hot and cold aisles, just the way that we had our servers facing, and they had to run across and down and over to the other side. And then coming out of they were IBM P595s on one side with LPARs, so that's logical partitions, but that doesn't really matter because you can assign any interface. So it had to plug in there, and it was this thick copper cable, guys. When I say thick, I mean it's like thicker around than like probably if you took like your finger, like your index and your ring finger and put your hand around it, it'd be like that thick, right? A little bit bigger around than your thumb, but like not super thick. These were thick cables. And they had to go down and then they had to go across, and we had to pull them pretty taut for probably like 5 or 6 of the cables. Those 5 or 6 cables experience intermittent errors with the cabling. Now, the IBM documentation strictly said this, and I'm going to tell you guys this. You're not going to believe me. I could probably go find the documentation. You're not going to believe me that this was a problem, but I'm just going to tell you right now it was. It said, do not bend this cable for the first 6 inches that it protrudes from the back of your server, from the back of the server on the IBM LPAR side, and for 6 inches on the other side as it goes into the switch. It cannot be bent. It has to be a straight 6 inches of cable coming out of the back before it bends. And I guarantee you a bunch of you are going to go, Scott, I don't believe it. I don't believe a bend in the cable in the first 6 inches affects either the near or the far end crosstalk or any of the other things that could affect it, and signal noise and all these things that we could possibly know as previous signal engineers in our careers. And I'll tell you, yep, it did. And when we fixed the length problem, not the girth problem, the length problem. No, when we fixed and got them just closer and they just weren't bent, it was fine. I guess now, they were as good a quality cables as any, and it was written into the standard that you couldn't bend them within the first 6 inches coming out of that system. But I'm telling you, on the servers where we pulled it a little too taut or played it a little too close to the line, it didn't work. Didn't work right. It was intermittent. And I didn't believe it. Yeah, I don't have the... Yeah, and I wouldn't believe it either, except I literally fixed these cables to get that out of there, and I moved the racks closer. We had to move the racks closer, and it went away. Yeah. The girth versus the length joke is definitely a problem there, Fast Cat. That's what she said or something for sure. No, that was a real thing. And well, Atticus, here's the thing: they weren't even unshielded twisted pair. They weren't unshielded or shielded twisted pair. They were the early copper InfiniBand cables. It was wild. Hey, there's Fisherman. Man, I haven't seen Fisherman in the wild for quite some time. He's out fishing too much. I wonder if that is a problem with fiber optics still. I don't know. You definitely can't do certain bend radiuses on fiber for breakage reasons. But no, this was not a breakage thing. This was, I just in my mind saw those electrons coming out of the back of that server and drifting to the side like something out of like Fast and the Furious or something, and then like hitting the sidewall before they turned, and then just fucking up the data rates. But yeah, we had legitimate problems with data rates and throughput on those cables until we straightened them back out. They actually had a specialized harness that you could put on it to keep it from bending as it came out of the back of that device. And we ended up using it, and all our problems went away. All those problems went away. Yeah. Hayes, I'll tell you, I was a signal engineer for a long time. I did everything I knew to try to get that to work, but I'm just going to tell you couldn't put a bend in those cables. Not for the first... You could wrap those cables up after 6 inches, but those first 6 inches... Because, again, other cables were closer, so they didn't have to go as high in the rack, so they weren't as taut. And other cables didn't have that problem. Yeah, Hayes. No, Hayes, look, I have I actually have a college class I'm teaching next quarter on signal engineering. So I've been doing signal engineering since my undergrad. I love it. Like, I love that stuff. If I had taken that path more, like if I had stayed networking, I probably would have just done all wireless my whole career. But I didn't stay that route. So I came over to Linux pretty early in my career, but I had some networking time in a school district, and all I did was wireless site surveys and stuff like that, which I think is a wonderful thing to understand and know, even if you just do it for your own home. There's really good things to practice as an engineer and mess with there, right? So you don't have dead spots in your house, and you can support when people come over and ask you for your Wi-Fi and all that crap. Anyways, all right, so we looked at this. And then this one says, your Linux team tells you they added a disk to your virtual Linux server, right? So maybe you got a different team that handles that. It's not you guys. Maybe you even have an automation that does it. How would you check that the disk has been added to your system? And how would you add it to the LVM system? So we're on Rocky 5. How would I know that a disk had been added to this system? They tell me, hey, it should be one of the disks within this. It should be this size. How would we go about checking that disk had been added? Maybe I can assume there's no disks on the system, right? I built it last night, and I'm just building it for a dev environment just to kind of test some stuff out. How might I check that the disk has been added to the system? And then how would I add it into my LVM system? And as a kicker, if you really wanted, how would you add that and mount that as an actual file system in the system, right? Yeah, LS block would be a good one. LS block could be a start. And it looks like we have XVDA, XVDB, C, and E. So we have a few of these. Yep. And then maybe I go PVS, VGS, LVS, and see that there's nothing given to the logical volume management, right? Logical volume management exists in this type of hierarchy. We have the ability to take disks, so PV create, and we can say, we can go like this actually if we want to be sneaky. XVDA, CE, right? And we could make all of those if we wanted to, and then we can do PVS. And it looks like one of them had something on it. Oh, A is the one. I didn't want A. Sorry. I meant B. Right? And then if I do PV create, we have PVS. What am I thinking? Now we have given the logical volume manager those 3 disks as something that it can use. So now physical volumes have been created for logical volume manager to be able to control those 3 disks that were added to our system. So they were not added, by the way, but now we're adding it to LVM. So now we have 3 disks that are 3 gigs each, and what we need to do is we kind of aggregate those up into a volume group. So we may say VG create, and then give like a name of like, I don't know, space. And then we can say we want to use dev XVDB, dev XVDC, and dev XVDE, and that will now, we might not need that. And then VGS will now show us that, and now space has 9 gigs free approximately. And if we do a PVS again, we'll see that those are now belonging to this volume group space. They are now being understood as they are aggregated up as 9 gigs within this volume group. I kind of think of it as like you give it permission with physical volumes to use them, and then volume groups kind of adds them all together. If you thought of it as your little physical disks as almost like layers of like a multi-layer cake, this is almost like they're all just individual layers. Then you put a bunch of frosting on them, and now they're one cake. They're one cake that can now be carved with logical volumes. That is going to carve them down. So we can LV create, and let's say plus, I don't know, dash F plus, it's dash L plus 100% free. We just give the whole thing, and the name for this might be space as well, and then we would use the volume group of space. I know space is getting used too much. Yeah, we'll wipe whatever's on there. Who cares? And then now, if I look at this, I can say PVS, VGS, LVS, and spaces there, and then I can say make FS ext4, let's say, on dev mapper, and it should be space, right? So it's volume group and then logical volume. And I can make that, and then now if I do a BLK ID on dev mapper space, we see that it's type ext4. And if I were to mount dev mapper space into MNT, df-h on MNT, we would see that it is a file system. If we mount grep MNT, you would see that MNT is a read-write ext4 file system on this logical volume that's been created for us, right? By the way, guys, you can do, I did like the most basic. I just aggregated those all up and striped across them, right? It's just writing across all three of them. You lose any one disk, you lose all the data. But I could have made this into RAID levels. I could have done all kinds of other things with this disk, but that's not necessarily the way I would do it, but that's a way to do it. That is a thing. Because, by the way, the back-end disks that you got from your virtualization team is probably already rated. and there's levels to where you want your data to be rated at, and that's really up to you and your team and your policy and all kinds of, there's all kinds of other things. You might say, well, Scott, what if it's really, really important data? Well, I wouldn't put it on the system like this then. I wouldn't attach it as a disk like that. I would attach it as a file share, and the file share itself would have protections on it. And then if I had to ever blow away Rocky 5, because who gives a damn about this ephemeral machine that gets blown up every night, the file system that's of importance is saved out on a network storage device and can just be remounted on literally any device. And when I need to copy it and move it between my dev environment to my tester, my QA, it's just a copy that's a normal function inside of that, storage block device or whatever, right? So my point in showing you all this is like, this is the types of things that I would expect a junior engineer to know. I'll tell you a fun one for some of you guys that know Michael Pessa. He's one of our guys on our server. He's very senior now, but when I first met him, he came on our team and he was just getting on his first Linux role. And I remember, I actually have it in a notebook here. I had 5 questions that I asked everybody, and he got a perfect score on all 5 of my questions. And one of my questions was that right there, and he did it from memory without a system in front of him. And I was like, that's pretty impressive. Like, he knew the exact steps to do all that. And I know nobody leaked my questions because I was asking these guys one after another. So I was pretty impressed with him. And then he went on and got his Red Hat certified architect, which is, like 8 Red Hat certs. So that's pretty impressive too. Let's go on this one. Rocky right here. How do we know who's logged onto this box? Like, how do you check the last login of users? I'll tell you guys, one of the things that's happened to me most often in my career is I get a call out on like a Saturday night or late on a Friday night. You're on call, but you didn't expect anything to be going on. There's no change windows. There's nothing happening. And what happens? You get a call out. Working with LVM is like 60% of a sysadmin. I think it's important, fishermen, to know how to do that stuff. Yeah, and know how to recover them too. Which you got to build them to be able to break them. I think storage in general and permissions to storage, especially new permissions on new deployments, because guys, we can get so many things right on like an automated deployment. We will very rarely get all the user information right, and part of the reason of that is like identity and access management teams are typically separate from Linux teams, and there's probably some good reasons for that in the big scheme of things. But yeah, you don't always have good communications between them, so my fixes don't get propagated back to them, and my career has largely been somewhat adversarial with identity and access management teams, IAM teams, right? So yeah. So anyways, how would you check the last login on a server? Oh, what I was going with that is like late at night, I'll get calls and they will tell me about how a server is down in an environment. And first off, it'll be like in a dev environment. So it's like, why are you calling me? This isn't this important. And they're like, well, we got a call from their team. What's their team doing up on a Friday night in their dev environment? Okay. And you go to the server, right? And I'm telling you guys, this happens all the time. This has happened to me so many more times than I want to admit or care to even think about right now. And it's you go to the server and there's a whole bunch of logins right around that time from a bunch of the people on their team. And you're like, wait, is there a change right now? And they're like, no. Were any of you guys on that server? And they're like, no. But you see a whole bunch of like logins for the last 3 hours on that server. So last is like your record of what's been going on. And last is really nice with TAC. So you might say, why would you use last with TAC? Well, last prints out to the screen, but it does it in reverse order, right? And that's absolutely atrocious because this is the oldest things that don't matter to me at all. So TAC will automatically reverse that order, so then these things are the closest to my current time. So TAC is very useful with last, especially if there's a long line of things that are happening. But the reason I show you guys this is like, because then I can say, well, it looks like you guys have been working on that server late at night on a Friday night for like the last 3 hours before this crashes. So who's going to tell me what was going on? Because we got a snapshot from last week. And they're like, no, we can't do that. We were updating our software. And you're like, oh, God damn it. On a Friday night? Really? So, all right. So then now you got to go and you got to troubleshoot with them and roll back some stuff and figure out how they broke whatever services are on there or how they broke whatever permissions they had, which hopefully you've scoped them down and haven't given them full root on the box. And now they're, and look, I try to tell people, like, you can, as it is, you can get mad on a Friday night and yell at people if you want, especially your devs, if that's your prerogative as a Linux admin, right? We're expected to be mean, right? But I'm going to tell you right now, if it were me, I would prefer to, like, back up and, like, be like, guys, look, I'm going to get this up, I'm going to get this running, and we're going to just have a meeting on Monday about it, right? Because for me, I don't want to fucking get my blood pressure up on a Friday night. Like, who cares? Like, I tell you guys all the time, I sleep really good as an engineer and as an admin in general. Like, I don't sit around and let myself get all worked up for stuff like that. I mean, sure, I tell a story and get a little worked up about it, but yeah, users, logins, these are important things to know. So when I go to a server, like if they tell me the server's got a problem, if I can SSH in uptime, I do last with like more on it to see if anybody's been on it, and then I typically will almost always, if I could type, look at the version of the server. Friday YOLO ship to production. Yeah, we'll fix it Monday. Yeah. Rope Dom makes for good water cooler chat. Yeah. My devs, man, I think I told you guys, I used to have about 200 dev teams that I ran all the Linux and all the Windows for a really big insurance company for a long time. A couple hundred dev teams doing a whole bunch of different crap. Excuse me. All right. So back on Rocky 5 over here. Here's a technical question I like to ask. How would you list all the open ports on a system? Can you tell me what processes are attached to any one port, and why might you want to know this? So you're just on a command line like this. What are you doing to get a system information, see what's exposed? Some of you might say, well, why is that important? Right? Why would I want to know what was exposed on the system? Well, last night, if you guys were around, I was building out the clustered environment, so Rocky 5 here, and we were adding in Node Exporter, right? And one of the things that I could do to see that Node Exporter is working is check right here for Node Exporter. And then another thing I can do is I can check on my local machine on port 9100 with metrics. Maybe I just do head for that. And I just get the information that the Node Exporter is exporting up for Prometheus to come scrape. And then this is Rocky 5, right? Some of you guys were here last night when I did this. Where is my... I guess right here. Where's Rocky 5 at? Here's lab. Instance. Can I just go grab Rocky 5? He's 51. But could I get just his information about Rocky? Oh, Rocky 5 is 150. Where's he at? He's 150. He's 55, not 51. So Rocky 5 is this guy. And if you said, "Hey Scott, could you just give me a quick rundown? Like we're in a meeting, and the question is, can you just give me a quick rundown of what's kind of going on? What's the usage of that machine?" Yeah, I got a little bit of information here that I can maybe dig up and look at here, and see a little bit about that server. How's he being used? Where's Rocky 5 over here? Here's Rocky 5 in this environment as kind of a quick heads up. How much CPU is being used, how much memory is being used, disk read and write. Like, is he really under heavy load right now? Probably not. But then we can go dig in on any individual piece, right? And we now have the last day worth of data that we can pull information from, right? And maybe we want, this is maybe a great high level, like quick look at the environment, but this may not be a great way to look at the system. Maybe I pull this down even more so I can see all my environment. Right, this is a great little what we call a HUD. Everybody here know what a HUD is? If you're doing monitoring, HUD is a heads-up display. This is just the way we look at the system. So this is just the way that we look at the system quickly. And how many of you are red-green colorblind here? Just me? I'm for sure badly red-green colorblind, but I think these are all green. But if you guys told me some of those were red, I might believe you. They look all green to me, though, right? But as a very quick heads-up display, we could see how this goes. Guys, I built this. I put this together yesterday, guys. This lab monitoring was something I stole off the internet long ago, right? Grafana has all the dashboards out there. Yeah, they really should use different colors than red-green because I'm super red-green colorblind. And these all look green to me, but I'm sitting here going, if one of them were red, I wouldn't know, like, because I've seen the red. And by the way, you might say, well, Scott, could you test? This thing says it updates every 15 seconds, right? Could you test that this thing is monitoring your environment correctly? And I said, I think so. C4-T. Let's go 300. I think you got to install stress for one of the labs. Let's install stress real quick. Do that command again. And we're going to stress this box out. And let's just see if Rocky 5, which is right about here, if he goes into like full-on stress mode here. Now it's going to be 15-second lagging on at least, right? Because it's got to fill up. But let's test our... We assume something works. We hope it works. But do we know it works, guys? I mean, do we really know? No, not really. Let's see. Do we see Rocky 5 just shot up to the top? You see that? He just shot up to the top. And did one of these just go red? I think that looks like a different... I mean, that's close to me, but that's red, I think. Right? Yeah. But guys, I'll tell you, that's real. To a guy with color blindness, I can only tell that this one's different. I can't really tell that that's red, but I can tell it's different than these ones a little bit. But if it were like a whole field of these that were red and green, I would look at you like, guys, I need one of you to do it. So guys, I've built a career around being able to build dashboards, but I don't look at dashboards. Yep. So look at that. By the way, isn't that cool that it went burr, but it also went burr at the top? BRR, right? Like server go burr, which is a great joke, by the way. But yeah, look, so I can see the state of our environment really quickly, right? Very, very quickly, just like see what's going on and know, and then we'll see when he goes back to chilling. And this will be kind of a cool little thing. But is there any historical data here? No, this is hot. This is warm data. This is right now in the environment. If I just needed a knock to have like a 65-inch screen that just says, are all the lab boxes up right now? Sure. But are some of the servers not reporting everything? Maybe. Why? We can go ask why. We can go dig in. But we have this. Also interesting. Look, partition percentage. Well, there's no partition on these other ones because it's all tempfs. He's only got partitions because I just gave them to him. Flying Wookiee, it's actually funny. I have done some programmatic deployments of Grafana dashboards, but I never programmatically generated one. No, like I've done deployments that like lay over a server and then pull down the ones that we need. And but I've never done like programmatically generating them. That would be actually kind of fun, because for you guys that don't know or need to, if you said, Scott, could I have that exact dashboard right there? I would say yes. Yes, you could. To get this exact dashboard right here, I could go to my dashboard settings and I can go to the JSON model and I could go drop this right here in the Discord, and this would be the exact same one for you guys in your environment as that I have. Or also, if I remembered where I took this from, because its name is Lab Monitoring, but when I took this, I took this from a Grafana dashboard, so they might have the name here. I think this might even be its ID 15172. You could then import that directly from Grafana as well, unless you're in a SCIF. If you're down in a SCIF, you can't do that, right? Yeah, here it is. It's 11074. So we can go to watch Grafana dashboards, and we could go 11. Where's it at? Hold on, we were looking at other stuff earlier. Oh, we were looking at all this other stuff. 11074, right? So I can go down here and go. I can search for 11074, and there's that dashboard for Prometheus Exporter right here. Yeah. Here it is right here. I'll link it to you guys so you don't lose it in ads. Boom. Boom. There it is right there. I'll wait for you guys to come back. I'll post it down there. I'll wait to talk for a minute, guys. I just wanted you guys to see, like, this is how I mean, I would rather start from something that's already kind of there, and then I'd rather start from something that's already there and then modify it the ways that I want, right? And then I can export certain parts of it and move them into other things for a better heads-up display and what I want to see and all that stuff. Fisherman will wait. You guys are back-ish. I'll give it a minute. It says the ad break's got a minute to finish still, or a few seconds. It says my community's back. Are you guys back? Give me like a something in chat if you guys are back. Yeah, I know. My ads are actually my ads are actually pretty aggressive, and the reason I have to do that, if you guys don't know on the Twitch side, is if you don't do a fair amount of ads, especially as just I'm not a Twitch partner or anything. I'm like a Twitch, I don't know, affiliate or whatever. I never got to 75 average, right? If you are that, you have to do so many ads per hour, or you get these things called pre-roll ads. And pre-roll ads might as well be like, trying to think of like a good anime to compare it to. But like, if you've ever seen those animes where like somebody can see like the little demon sucking on the side of somebody's head, but nobody else can see it. Pre-roll ads are like those little demons sucking on people's heads. And the problem is you can't see, or what it is people can't get in your channel for the first 3 minutes without watching ads. And literally nobody's going to do that ever. Yeah, we got a full house today over on the Twitch side. We got like my mods, and we got like the old school people, and we got Robodom here. Robodom's one of the mods. Yeah, we got everybody around. Robodom's the only one that's actually a mod of mine on YouTube as well. I don't have very many mods that go across the whole thing, but yeah, do you guys see how I, through no great genius of my own, now have a lab that's being monitored? However, there is one problem with this, and some of you may have remembered this from last night, but let me show you the one problem. We go over to my little con board, which, Fisherman, you might remember this. I've reinstituted this. This is now live again, and this is now what we do on Sunday nights, right? But one of the things that I did and I fixed was my node exporter is running on all nodes. However, the configuration for Firewall D is not set to allow 9100 persistent. That is set now, so they are being scraped now. So for right now, the nodes are working, but that's very one-off. If a node reboots, it will have node exporter running, but the Firewall D will be blocking it. So, and then you say, why don't you just fix that now? Well, because I'm trying to make my lab operational and show people good operational practice where we don't take downtime except when it's planned. And here's the thing, I can be sneaky and I can roll through the servers and most people would never know. But I also don't think that's as good a practice as kind of having a change record of things that we've done and what we're working on. Plus, I kind of want people to see what some of our workflow might look like. These things are mostly done over here, but we can't call them done until we've went through a maintenance window and actually verified and applied them through a reboot. Because our lab is a stateless lab, right? This is a design decision we made, guys. This server, for all the things that you guys have seen me do on him, when we're done with him and he reboots, he will go back to having no memory of this place. He's like Gandalf. I have no memory of this place. So, yeah, sending. I'm sad about Chicken not being around. I know a few years ago he had some health issues, but he's still in the industry. He hops on sometimes Sunday mornings and does streaming on Twitch. He does some game streaming, but I haven't seen him in a while. And then some of you guys might remember YGBSM. You got to be shitting me. That's his actual name. He was the guy who did the really awesome write-up on the API Academy stuff. I haven't heard from him in years, but that's the nature of this. It's like you work on stuff, you try to get people doing Linux, and you try to get them to go off, and eventually they got to fly away. Hopefully they come back. Hopefully they hang out. His game streamings where he just Fisherman. I loved watching him. He was on in the last 2 weeks. I saw him on a Sunday morning, and I went over and hopped in and talked to him for a little bit. Yeah, but I always liked hanging out with him. He's also some of you guys that were around for our weekend activities a few weeks back when we did our 11th year of being a professional Linux users group and 6 years on Discord. We had a big meeting. And on Friday night before we did the big meeting, we just kind of had like a hangout and we were telling our favorite stories. And my favorite story involves him and one of our other guys, Salty, who I actually know, Salty Catfish. I know him outside of here professionally and personally. And he was showing us how to hack around with these APIs, and he was using Pluto.tv, and it was really funny, all these things that he had observed. And then Chicken speaks up, and we knew Chicken had just gotten a new job the week before, and he goes, I'm the new API director hired to fix all those problems you're showing right there. So I don't mind saying that Pluto.tv used to have some API problems, but also one of our guys was using them as an example, and he wasn't doing anything malicious, guys. He was checking out an API token and then being able to just read channel stuff and do stuff that he probably wasn't supposed to be able to do. It was almost like, is it really like if I went to, I know Sending still works in his office, right? Is it really like that big of a deal if I just make it a joke every day to get past his security and get into where they go and eat, and I just hang out and have lunch with them every day, but I never check in with security. I always do some silly thing to get past security every day. Is that really that big of a deal? Well, to security it's a fucking big deal, but to me, I might just chuckle about it, right? Because that's systems engineering and hacking and stuff, and exploiting people, right? That's fun stuff for us as engineers. But my point is, he wasn't doing anything malicious. He was just hanging out and stuff like that. Base Mage said, "How would I recommend becoming a junior network admin with a college degree?" It depends what you want to do. I got into the industry through networking. I got out of the Army. I had a CCNA, so I could program the hell out of a router and a switch back then, but I didn't know anything about servers. And I got in, so Base Mage, what I would tell you is if you have a degree that's in that field, right, then I would put that on my resume. I would have a resume that's under 1 page. That resume would be something showcasing your strengths. This is my generic het email. That is my real name. Some of you guys know my real name. I don't care if people know it. These are real things about me, but the phone number is different. You can call 867-5309. That's fine. But these are real things about me and real jobs that I've had and real degrees that I hold and, all that kind of stuff. But what I would do is I would have a 1-page resume about yourself, and I would tailor it to exactly the job that I wanted. So if I was over here looking at this Linux admin job that we were looking at earlier, and it says that, man, they want a minimum of 7 to 8 years of hands-on experience and general knowledge in Linux operating systems. See, they want that, but they might take a little less. But I would definitely mention if I had 3 to 4 years, I would at least have that on there. And then They want a strong technical knowledge of Fedora, CentOS, and RHEL 7. Oh man, they want you to have some old systems. They got some old shit that they're decommissioning. You're probably going to be big on decommissioning stuff for pre-production and production environments. That's good. You need to understand operational stuff. But what I would do is I would tailor the things I had done at these recent jobs here, and I would put them so that my bullet points align with these things strongly. They want me to have Linux, Unix, AIX. They want me to be an old man in this. Unix and AIX are much less used in the last 10 years, but they still exist. Yeah, Sending, thanks for coming by. I know you got the baby to take care of and stuff. They want you to understand cron jobs and certificate management and SFTP and LDAP. They want you to know everything. Okay, fine. Show how you know how to do that. Mine right here is focused on security stuff because a lot of people wanted security type stuff, and I think maybe I was even going for a position that had security involved, right? They want you to understand. I would definitely have a bullet point for middleware and Apache. I've deployed HTTPD using automated methods. I've troubleshot it in the environment with up to 200 different dev teams, and I would work with that. Oh, without a college degree. Yeah, so what I would do is this then. So without a college degree is fine too, because I didn't have a college degree when I first started, right? Let's go look at, I'm going to show you guys something I use with my college students. This is actually, one of these is with my college students. Hold on. These are all notes, guys. I just keep random notes everywhere. That was something we were working on. Book updates. Book updates are all done. That's good. I had a thing. Oh, so here's my CCNA topic. I show this to my college students, right? Because at the end of like my college classes where my students are doing Cisco, they say, well, you've often said in this course that this course covers most of what you would need for a CCNA. And I say, yes, it does. And they will tell me, then students will ask, and this is a common thing, especially based as you're kind of starting out. They'll say, well, how do I know I'm ready? Like, how do I know that I'm ready to go? Like, you're working on your CCNA, right? And you wanna know when you're ready to go take that cert. Well, these are the exact topics, and I pulled these off of the Cisco website a few, I don't know, probably did this a couple months ago for my college students. And I would say this is how I know that I'm ready for a cert, or that I think I'm ready. I've studied everything. I've read some books on it. I've watched some videos. I've maybe looked at some people with some pointers and stuff. But then I would come here and I say, can I explain the role and function of network components? Can I talk about routers for a minute? Could I tell you that a router exists at layer 3 of the OSI model? Routers deal in packets as their protocol data unit. Routers take source IP and destination IP and make path determination and packet switching out their different interfaces based on routing tables. Those routing tables are populated by connected interface configurations or static routing information from admins or dynamic routing protocols that are populated between administrative distance of 2 and 255. And then I would just go through like this in my head, and I'm just brain dumping on you guys because that's what I do. But then could I talk about a layer 2 and a layer 3 switch? And an easy way to do this, if you tell me to talk about two things, I might compare them to each other. Layer 2 switch is the typical type of switch that we deal with. They are dealing with layer 2 or the data link layer. They deal in MAC addresses as source and destinations. They can have VLANs assigned to them. That's virtual local area networks, which are defined by 802.1q tagged frames. Layer 3 switches are doing the same thing as routers. However, we tend to make that distinction based on whether or not they're doing their routing functions inside of hardware, whereas routers are typically doing it inside of software, what we call the iOS, Internet Working Operating System. And they had iOS with Cisco, 25 years before Apple thought to throw it on their thing. Could I talk about next-gen firewalls and IPS as intrusion prevention systems? What are they doing? What are they watching for? And my point in all this is not to show you guys that I can brain dump, because hopefully you guys know that if I've been teaching this for 17 years, I can brain dump it, right? But we could go through that, and I could brain dump this the whole time. But that's how I would know. Do I know how to configure and verify access control lists? All right. We configure access control lists by going to the command terminal and going into global configuration mode and saying, access list, giving it a number, or sometimes we can do named access control lists. Access control lists between 0 and 99 tend to be our standard access control lists, which are based on only the source IP address in the packet, and then 100 through 99, and then also there's an extended range above 1,000 that you don't really need to memorize, and I don't know right off, but those ones can do source, destination, protocol, port number, source and destination port, layer 4 protocol, right? And if it's TCP or UDP and all these things. So my point is, you could just sit here and dump these, right? And then let's say I get to one and I go, oh shit, I don't really know traditional versus controller-based networking, so I'm just gonna I'm gonna have a little way that I assign it. Maybe I do like an asterisk. Scott doesn't know, right? Anybody here remember Eurotrip? Scotty doesn't know. That song has plagued me since that came out in like 2004. But right here, how do I? So then I'd go watch some Cisco material. Maybe I'd go read the book again. Fiona and me. He goes to the party that night to forget about Fiona dumping him. And if any of you guys remember how Fiona dumps him, she comes up to him and goes, "I can't stand all this lying and cheating on each other." And he goes, "I've never lied or cheated on you." And she goes, "I know. That's what makes this so hard." Such a great line from such a funny movie. I got to make my wife watch that one of these days. She's never seen it. I tried to make her watch it once, and she got mad at me for something else, and she's never watched it since. That was years ago. That was before we even got married. I got to get her to watch it one of these days. What's a northbound and a southbound API? Do I understand the difference? Maybe I got to go study that. Do I understand? Can I explain AI, generative and predictive, and machine learning and network operations? Why might I want to know how to do that? Maybe I need to do that, right? So I'm showing you guys all this to say, I can test myself, a little bit of what we call a self-check. And before I ever go and get myself embarrassed in a test that costs $300 and something, right? I don't want to go fail that CCNA. So I get all ready here, and I just go and then I'll go take it when I'm ready. But are there any things about interface and cable collisions? Understand their way of looking at collisions, errors, mismatch, duplex, and or speed. What does it mean to have duplex? What's a full duplex versus a half duplex communication? Hell, do I know what a simplex is? Simplex isn't really part of that. Yeah. If you need this is up in the Discord, but this is also directly off the Cisco site. I can go find, if I did CCNA, watch, it's like this. It would look like this. It would be CCNA objectives. This is literally where I pulled that from. Go to Cisco Learning Network. I might not even need the Learning Network. Let's see. Yeah, this is exactly where I pulled it from. Right here. Boom. Open them all up. You got to clean it up a little bit after you grab it and put it in your notepad, but this is the page right here. So I'll link this to you. Bad Mage. Yeah. And then, we do have some networking down in our Discord, and if you asked about Cisco stuff, I would definitely give you as much time as I could around that, because this is near and dear to my heart. This is how I got into the industry. And I tell you guys, even to today, I don't think there's any studying around networking that is bad in a systems engineering context. Because if you say, well, Scott, do I really need to memorize all these things? Yeah, there's things you don't need to know, but it doesn't hurt to know how your data are moving on the network. Because, when I tell you guys that I used to maintain 5,000 servers at a big insurance company, every single one of those 5,000 servers was touching an internet connection in some way. They were touching a network connection, right? And that network connection then translates into all these other things. Hey, thanks for the Prime, Plank. You could use that anywhere. You chose to use it here, so that's always cool. I do appreciate that. Let's say that I was back here. Let's watch our environment. That environment should be, Rocky 5 should be back to chilling. Yep, he's back to chilling. But Rocky 5, what's he doing? Here's a bunch of information about him. Here's a bunch of information that he sees. That he sees about the network and the way around him. And then if I understand the wording of networks, I can figure out about where he's going to send data and how data are traversing the network and how it gets to him, and how if I ping www.google.com, I can explain that while I gave it this name, it went and figured out this name, right? This is a different type of addressing. This is a layer 3 address. This is a layer 7 address. And then it actually got the traffic to go there. And then if it wasn't able to go there, I could start to troubleshoot how the data are supposed to flow. But again, this is one of these things where, like, do you really need to know all that as a systems engineer? Not early on, right? Not early on. But if you tell me, hey, Scott, I'm going to be a principal and I'm going to design these things and move data and really be, I don't want to say like a rock star or a unicorn or any of those terms that people like to use. But if you want to be somebody who's valuable to the industry, understand the disciplines, understand how things work and how the data flow, and you will be more and more valuable, right? So, yeah, Mage, I know that's a lot to like look at, but remember, I didn't build all this stuff in my home lab overnight. Some of you guys have been watching me hang out, build this stuff for years, right? I try to show you guys how to build it, right? I have talks and stuff and different recorded lectures on how a lot of this stuff works. Atticus said, which certs should someone look at when switching to Linux administration and or engineering? I have a few. So the number one thing about Linux for me is, like, I think you have to get your hands on Linux, right? You just got to start doing Linux. Ways to start doing Linux are to get into Killer Coda. Killer Coda has all kinds of free lab environments for you guys to work in. If you want my lab environment, it's just !labs over on the Discord, or over on Twitch rather. And it shows you all these Linux labs that walk you through all this stuff. And one of my favorite things about these labs is if you go ask a question about it, if something's busted or something doesn't work for you, we have, like, if I had to say conservatively, a few hundred people in our Discord that have done the labs and can help you. So there's quite a few people that hang out in there that would help you with labs or talk you through things. And I think that that's valuable. But then the question is, what would I do to get into Linux? Well, I would get enough to be able to populate a resume, right? So being able to say that you have some qualifications around Linux. But if you're saying, hey, like, what search should I do? I would tell you, I mean, there's obviously all kinds of good certs. I'm a big fan of free stuff. So you could start with free certs. There's a bunch of free certs here in our beginner start here section. API stuff, chaos engineering. These things all lend to being an engineer. Get some cybersecurity under your belt. These are still free. There's still free ones out here. It's been a couple years, but they still have some free ones for you guys. And you go get that certified in cybersecurity. It's at least a thing to put on your resume. Hey, I'm at least security focused. We have some certifications that you guys can get if you go through our courses. Our courses are free, but you do have to do that with the group. The security engineering course starts next month, and it is free. If you guys need any of that, you come up here to the events, and you look at all the events. There's bash study groups and talks that I'm giving on Werewolf, which is a supercomputing. It's a tool, but we use it in supercomputing a lot. We got a late night bash study that I'm trying to run as long as I can, and then I'm going to try to hand it over to somebody. Somebody that's on late can run that. We do lab maintenance on Sundays, so we can show you guys. I show you guys how we clean up my lab and make the environment work better for everyone. And you guys have lab access if you're in our Discord, right? You can go down and you can get into these labs and you can do these labs and figure stuff out and learn how to be a Linux engineer, right? Here's our lab environment. Tells you how to get in there, right? So, all right, all that to say, the question was around getting into Linux admin. I would tell you, get the base stuff on your resume. Lead with the things that are strong for your, you want to get into Linux, start leading with the things that you're doing in Linux. Get maybe a little project portfolio together. If you don't know what projects to do, we have quite a bit of projects here in we got like a projects channel. And there's a bunch of different projects you can go work on and do. There's all the lab projects too. If you did those are good. If you scroll way up on this one to the very beginning of this channel, there's a bunch of this channel was started for projects. The monitoring deep dive project. You want to build something that looks like this? It's not super hard to do. It's not super hard to get that data to flow around in your network the right way, right? This is all something that's very, very approachable and very capable for you guys to build out if you needed to. All right. Oh, so then where was I going? I had another talk. Yeah, I actually had the talk ready if we wanted to do excelling in the engineering field, but maybe we'll save that one for later. Maybe we'll just call it here for a little bit. Yeah, but people that are interested in doing stuff. And yeah, Atticus, that's the goal, right? Get this stuff, get people into doing this. And it's a lot of stuff. Like, you might look at this and go, man, that's too much for me to do. Well, you got to find the individual pieces of this that you like to do. Some of you guys want to be network engineers. Do networking, you know. Some of you guys want to be security engineers. I say do security. You can do security while you're playing in Linux. There's nothing. I mean, I would argue you can find. I don't know if you can find a single security gig out there that doesn't have Linux somewhere mentioned in it. Not anyone that's like hands-on, because literally all of them are going to be that. Yeah, Chingo Pie. Yeah, definitely take bite-sized chunks. Yeah, it's the other thing is that old adage about eating an elephant, right? One bite at a time. Yeah, there's too much here, right? And you guys are watching me kind of just brain dump on you from 20 plus years of doing it and 17 years of teaching it. We can bite down on any one part and look at it, but today we were mostly looking at how you guys get these skills and how you guys figure out what you want to do and then figure out how to go do it, right? And if you tell me, hey Scott, I want to be a Linux engineer, I'd say, well, go get more hands-on in Linux. Build yourself a little lab. Get an environment stood up that shows some of this, right? And because at the end of the day, when you get to that interview, you have to be able to talk to the things intelligently that they want. You need to be able to talk to the things on your resume that got you in there. And then you need to be able to kind of show people that you can do this work, right? Because they're going to hand you the keys to their system. They're going to make you admin on their system, and they want to believe that you can keep their system running correctly. And that's big. So, Atticus said, I feel like I'm too old, 38. Man, I don't think 38's too old to get in systems engineering. You'd be 20 years younger than most people on your team. Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, look, I didn't get into, I went right from high school into the Army, so I didn't do a lot of this stuff. I started getting into it after I got out and was in networking, right? I wish I had known a lot of this stuff more in the 90s too. I played a lot of games. I was pretty involved with computers in the 90s, but I wasn't involved with Linux in the 90s. And then I got involved in Linux in the early 2000s, right? So, doing it professionally and getting stuff to work and productionalizing it for companies, and there's some good value. That's funny what like closed captioning keeps saying over there. But yeah, Atticus, we're gonna get as many of you guys into this field as we can, and I'm gonna try to show you guys as much as I can about doing this stuff. If you guys miss, if you're not here when I'm talking about the stuff, we have the courses here. The courses are free. This is what the book looks like, right? The books are all up in the Discord, but they're all online. You could print them out. You could take this and you can print this to a PDF, and then you could run away like a comic book villain or whatever. You can print this thing as a PDF and just save it on your system and run away and never talk to us again, and that's fine. I don't care, because I think that you guys could do this stuff, and I think that you could meaningfully change the way that your career path is kind of going. I really do think you guys have the ability to do that. You don't need, most of you probably don't even need me. It's like, there's this interesting thing that happens, and I can tell you this about people, having taught over 5,000 college students. Some people just need to be told they can do something. There's streamers who, whether you like them or not, like their thing is go out and make games or go out and do these things, and like they just give people permission to do stuff, and those people go and do cool stuff. And it's like, yeah, Atticus, yeah. The goal is to do stuff that gets you guys fired up and doing it. But then even when I'm done talking, like just get in there, get your hands on the system, do the commands, watch the commands come out, and then think about how that applies, reflect back on that. And if you struggle with that, if you're like, I don't even know what to reflect back on, that's what a lot of the labs do. If you're up in Killer Coda, those labs walk you through, they make you do stuff like SAR dash and TCP, and they here's lowercase n. That's TCP. I can never remember this one, lowercase n. Yeah. And then like, what is this showing me? What is happening actively in the system, and how does that compare with like if I have eTCP? It always takes me 30 times to get that damn command right. But then what is this showing me that's different? And why would I want to know it? And is the system behaving properly, or is it having a lot of errors, transmits and retransmits there? Like what's going on with the system? Yeah. Yeah, Atticus, we're always glad when Fisherman's around. He even if he's just lurking, he's pretty good. Um, what do I have, by the way? I have a college class to finish by Sunday. That's my going to college, right? Working on my PhD. I've got a college class to finish. I have more stuff to write for you guys. We have that big event on Saturday, which is me walking through the werewolf. I might even record that for myself to kind of watch where I need to make that better. I gave like a little demo of it yesterday, but it's getting there. It's getting where I want it. And then I've got to clean up. Man, I got 2 college classes I'm teaching next quarter, so I got to go clean up all that stuff. And one of them I haven't prepped before, so if you guys don't know, once you've prepped a course, it's a lot easier to do them in the future. But until you've prepped a course, you don't have your slides, you don't have all your reference material, you don't have all these other things that maybe you want to have your students look at and kind of dig into. So, yeah, so I got a lot of stuff that I'm working on the next couple weeks, but I'll be around, right? We'll be streaming. The goal again is get you guys into Discord. This stuff is all free in Discord. There's only one thing anybody can pay for, and that's only if you find it. That's my book. These books, though, the Professional Linux Users Group Linux Admin course and the Security Engineering course are completely free. They don't cost you nothing. You can do everything in those and all the labs and everything for free. All you got to do is get access to the Prolog group, which is in the Discord, and it tells you how to do it. So, other than that, let's call it here. I appreciate you guys all coming. We'll find somebody to raid over on the Twitch side. We don't have that many people. We'll find somebody to raid anyways. And on the YouTube side, I appreciate you guys coming. I will see some of you guys